quantum computing and Bitcoin. So me and Jerry, we went over this last time, and it was a long thing that we talked about, and it got very in the weeds. But I just want to go over this because I think people are going to hear about quantum computing killing Bitcoin, especially because of this guy. So this just came out 2 or 3 days ago. I can't remember. But this is Chris Wood, Global Head of Equity Strategy for Jefferies Global. And Jefferies Global Blank is 64 billion assets under management. Pretty big. And he himself had 10% allocated to Bitcoin for his master fund. And this is what he would recommend to clients. And he got in on December 17, 2020 at 22,000 Bitcoin. So if you got in before Chris, congratulations, you outdid all the geniuses out there. But what's happened today, or the last 2 days, is Chris has said, I'm out of all my Bitcoin positions, and I'm recommending everybody get out because of quantum computing is going to break Bitcoin. And again, we talked about this before, so I just want to go over this. I mean, Chris is probably a very smart guy, but there's just some little nuances. So this is what's going to break Bitcoin. So the question you have to ask is, well, other people are talking about it. Should I just sell now and wait for it to break and then buy it back? You could, and it's not financial advice. The question is, when will it happen? How does this actually affect you, this quantum computing device? First, you got to break this down into 2 things. I'm going to try to make this as simple as possible. There's a physical qubit, there's a logical qubit. A physical qubit essentially is like a soap bubble, and the logical qubit is essentially what we bring together that actually makes this device work. So what's a physical qubit? This thing right here. A physical qubit, it's a superconducting electrical circuit, it's a trapped ion, it's an electrical spin, it's a photon, it's a defect in a crystal, essentially the soap bubble, and that's what's in those things, which makes things, they look so interesting. And we can get thousands of these, but you can't build a reliable computer or quantum computing out of popping bubbles. So if anybody says like, oh, this has this much qubits and this much power, they're full of it. They don't know what they're talking about. This is the only thing that matters, the logical qubit. So when you're talking about this, well, how many of these logical qubits have we made so far in the world? 56, or excuse me, those are the physical. 12. The logical ones are 12, and then 1. That's all we've made so far with all of these physical qubits, again, the soap bubbles that are very temporary. For these logical qubits, the only thing that can actually make this work, we've made like 12, 1, mostly 0. And if you take a look at this chart over time, you've got 12, 4, 28, 0. Actually, I don't know how they got 28. That's Microsoft. So how powerful are these computers? Well, when they do get them to run and work, Google's Willow chip solved a complex mathematical benchmark in 5 minutes, which would have taken the best supercomputers 10 septillion years. And then, of course, if you're talking about quantum computing, this is the basic thing that I get, which is, hey, man, if quantum computing is so powerful, like we just took a look at, who cares about Bitcoin? What about the bank accounts? What about the nuclear codes? Come on, bro. You're not thinking. But that's not how quantum computing works, unfortunately. Quantum computing, in a classical computer, you're just dealing with zeros and ones. Quantum qubit, again, logical versus physical, they're doing them both at once. It can use zeros and ones all together. And it can do these quadrillion or septillion amount of transactions, or excuse me, of computational power per second. Doesn't that mean that it can definitely break into your bank account, or it can definitely take those nuclear codes? Well, no. Jerry, what happens if you try to log into your, I don't know, Wells Fargo account after like 3 or 4 times? What happens?
Cut off.
You get cut off, right? And then because if you had as much time as you could and it would just give it to you, of course, that's what would happen. But of course, with banks, with any other institutions, you can only get so many tries and access points to try to recover it that it just shuts you off, and that's it. And if you think about banks, have you tried to move more than $10,000 out of your bank? Yeah, good luck.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I have, and it's not pretty what happens.
Right. So if it's brute force and you can keep going forever, then yes, quantum computing will do that. But if it's going to be 3, 5, 10 times, it's not going to happen. There's only so much you can do. And then people say, what about the nuclear codes, genius? Look, for nuclear codes, we can get the codes, but then you got people, first of all, it has to go through the president, whichever nation we're talking about here, has to actually give the order. People have to manually move things. So just because we have nuclear codes, per se, doesn't mean we're going to launch nuclear missiles. And then lastly, people say, what about AI? Couldn't that just do it? And then it could mimic Trump. I'm like, look, I don't know if Skynet's coming, probably, but that's not what we're talking about today. So we're just talking about if quantum computer is going to break Bitcoin. So the problem with Bitcoin there is that you got no human firewall. It's pure math. There's no customer support, no reversals. And it can target these accounts, these wallets, because it can, again, try to break the elliptical curve cryptography, and it can do it. The problem is we don't have the qubits. We have the physical, but the logical I just showed you. So the question you have to ask yourself, and I think what should have been asked by Chris Wood was, well, how many logical qubits do we have? How many do we need to actually break Bitcoin? We need 2,330 logical ones. Right now we got 12 to 48. The danger zone is 2330, but people say, well, Moore's law, it's going to keep going up. Here's Google IBM projections as far as 2030. We might have 100. So there's that. That means it's not going to worry. Although there is something that you should worry about, like Jerry talked about, quantum resistance. That's true, but to migrate everything from the old wallets, and think of all the wallets that are out there for Bitcoin, but then to migrate to a new standard, think of all the different transactions we have to go through, and think of the cost of what it's going to be. And remember how high it went for Bitcoin transaction fees back in 2021. It's going to go pretty high, and it's going to take, some people say 30 days. That's not true. Some say 6 to 18 months, and some say 2 years. So to sum this all up, ignore anybody who says qubits and doesn't distinguish between physical and logical. You need 2,330 logical qubits to actually make this hum. And the current status is 48. So hopefully that made sense.